I am pleased to introduce Troy Sakihara. He is a biologist with the Division of Aquatic Resources based in Hilo on the Big Island. And he has a wide variety of studies, including ankling pools and estuaries. So Troy, I'm gonna give it over to you. You can start sharing your screen.
All right, thanks, Kim. Thank you once again for having us be here today to present some of the work that's been done in some brackish water habitats, particularly here on Hawaii Island. I also want to acknowledge the collaborators on this presentation, Megan Lamson, Dena Sedar, and Cris Teague. Also, support and funding for a lot of the work that's going to be presented has been provided by DLNR, Aquatic Resources, Dingo Johnson Sportfish Restoration, Hawaii State Parks Division, and Hawaii Wildlife Fund. So our talk is going to be in two parts. The first half is going to be covering invasive species in Hawaiian ancholine pools, and then we're going to shift over to a more site-specific project where we're looking at the Tilapia expansion in Wailoa River Estuary in Hilo. So first off, what is an ancholine habitat? So the term ancholine actually is derived from the Greek word ankylos, which means near the sea. They're basically landlocked brackish water pools that form along the coastline, and they have subterranean connections to groundwater and saltwater, and they fluctuate with the tides. Now, Dena, I'm not going to go into too many details because Dena actually gives a nice, more charismatic description of ancholine pools, so I'll save that for her. But I'll just mention that one of the star animals in ancholine pools here in Hawaii is Huakaʻi dinuruba. It's an endemic shrimp, or more commonly known as Ōpaiʻula. They play a key role in these ecosystems by their intensive grazing, so they keep the algae in check in these pools, in these pristine pools. This is just a close-up of the Ōpaiʻula. They're pretty tiny, but yeah, I think most of you are familiar with these species. We also have an array of other endemic and native crustaceans that are found exclusively in ancholine habitats here in Hawaii. Some of these are actually listed as endangered. There are estimated 1,000 habitats that are ancholine habitats that are known worldwide. We have roughly 600 habitats that have been recorded here in Hawaii. So we have the highest concentration of ancholine habitats. Most of them are actually located here on Hawaii Island, particularly on the Kona and Ku'u coast. So of the pools that are found here on Hawaii Island, as you see dotted in yellow, roughly 55% or over half of these pools are either regularly monitored or maintained by various agencies, offices, and organizations across the island. Now, unfortunately, it's estimated that 90 to 95% of these habitats across the state are either impacted or threatened by invasive species, human impacts, development, climate change, what have you. So very heavily impacted ecosystem. Now, when we say invasive species, what are we talking about? One of the primary culprits, especially in ancholine pools, are invasive fishes, as you see listed here. The top three, guppies, western mosquito fish, and mollies, belong to a family of fish called piscileids, or top minnows. They reproduce very quickly and very readily. They adapt to many different types of habitat conditions, and they're found across many ancholine pools across Hawaii. Another problem we have is with tilapia, more specifically the Mozambique species, Oreochromis mozambicus. So we find those quite commonly in ancholine habitats as well. So what are the impacts of invasive fishes in ancholine pools? So aside from preying directly on Ōpaiʻula and other endemic species, one of the more broad and greater impacts that they have is just altering the behavior of Ōpaiʻula. So just their mere presence in the pools actually forces these Ōpaiʻula into hiding, especially during the day when these fishes are active. And because they play such a key role in grazing, they graze 24 hours a day. When you have fish in there, it essentially cuts the grazing in half, and it allows for algae and other things to overtake the pool, and it really shifts the ecosystem off balance, and it creates a different type of ecosystem and habitat in these ancholine pools that you wouldn't normally see, in a pristine pool. We also have problems with invasive vegetation. It's not just fish and animals. There's a lot of invasive riparian and emergent vegetation that grows around ancholine pools. Pickleweed, seashore paspalum, kialve, especially on the leeward coast, as well as California grass in some areas. And this is really attributed to the fact that these pools are located right along the coastline, right at the interface of all of these different types of habitats, terrestrial, coastal, marine. So you have a convergence of all of these different impacts coming from different areas. So yeah, a lot of invasive species you find in ancholine pools. Oh, sorry. So up next, I'm going to be handing it off to Megan and Dena. They're going to be taking you on a virtual Huakaʻi out to their areas to kind of highlight some of the work that they've been doing, restoration work, and some success stories that have occurred in ancholine habitats.
Hi there, I'm Megan with DAR, or the Division of Aquatic Resources team in Kona, on the leeward side of Hawaiʻi Island, and real excited to talk to you today a little about ancholine pools, as well as some of the threat from invasive species. Hi there, I'm Megan. So with that, I'll be starting our virtual tour here, a little Huakaʻi of our brackish water pools and ecosystems, these ancholine pools. So the one behind me is near and dear to my heart. It's called Ho'onaua, and it exists in the Waiahinu Ahupua'a of the Ka'u Forest Reserve. And you might see a line of people in buckets. And what this is a group of 50 volunteers with the Hui Loko and Hui Malamaloko Ia groups, and we're gathered here at ancholine pool to remove a highly invasive type of coarse grass that is degrading this pool system. It's really choking it out and impacting the water flow around it. And so we were able, 50 of us, to remove a fair amount of this paspalum. The idea will be to remove all of it, and so it is more a home for the native Okaiula and native grasses like our Opae Ma'u or Rupia, as well as the native Ma'u grass and Naupaka and other vegetation that grows around it, and continues to provide habitat for visiting shorebirds, as well as resident water birds and our charismatic minifauna, the pool shrimp. So with that, if you want to join me, I'll be driving to Mahai'ulas to visit my colleague Dena Sedar with Hawaiʻi State Park, and she's going to talk to you a little bit about invasive fish and why guppies are such a problem for our ancholine pools. So come with me.
Hi, my name is Dena Sedar, and I'm the interpretive specialist for Hawaiʻi State Parks. Right now, we're in the Mahai'ula section of Keikahakai State Park on the island of Hawaii. So I'm here to tell you all about ancholine pools, one of my favorite ecosystems here in Hawaii. So there's actually a lot of great trivia about ancholine pools. Hawaii is the only state in the US that has ancholine pools, and it takes a special environment for them to exist. And not only that, but here on Hawaii Island, we have the highest concentration of ancholine pools in the entire world. We have over 600 of these pools, predominantly on the Kona and Ka'u coasts, because we're such a young island and there's so many subterranean cracks. And these subterranean cracks allow the fresh water from up Mauka or from the mountains to drain down into these cracks. And then sometimes before they make it to the ocean, they'll pop up in these little like divots or pukas, and if water fills up, then it becomes a habitat for the 8 different ancholine pool shrimp that are found here in Hawaii. Now there's 2 main species that you are most likely to see if you get to see an ancholine pool while you are in Hawaii. So there's the small size. They're known as opai ula, which in Hawaiian translates to red shrimp. So opai means shrimp, and ula means red. And then there's the larger species. They're about twice the size of the opai ula. These are called Metapateus lohena. We don't know a Hawaiian name for it, so a lot of times we just call them metas. So while this illustration might make them look big, they're actually really small. The opai ula never get bigger than the size of a dime, and the metas are about twice their size. So when you are seeing anchuline pools, you're probably going to see the opai ula and metas just swimming around, and they're going to be eating the algae. But unfortunately, a lot of our anchuline pools here in the Hawaiian Islands have invasive fish. I've been working to restore this anchuline pool here in Mahaiula, and unfortunately we have guppies. The other kinds of fish that might be in pools are mollies or tilapia. So let's go check out our trapping procedure. So right now, this is kind of a mid-level tide. So this morning, the pool was really, really full. It went down, and it might go down a little bit more. So when it's that high, the best method of trapping is using these minnow traps. So what we do is we put bait in here. Usually we use cat food or cat treats, and we put them in wherever we think we're gonna find guppies, wherever we see little rings. And then what happens is the fish can swim in, but they can't figure out how to swim out. So you can see this has been in for maybe about 20 minutes, and you can see we caught maybe about 10, but that's actually good news because our numbers should be going down. So far this week, on Monday we pulled out 1,022, on Wednesday we pulled out 499, and so far today we have pulled out 427. So our numbers are going down, which is good news, and hopefully we can say the pool is guppy free, hopefully by February.
Anchuline pools are habitats for all sorts of native flora and fauna, and even a unique combination of bacteria. So what you can see here, we've got a visiting migratory golden plover, Pacific golden plover, and also known as kolea, and a variety of native plant species along the periphery of this pool. So we've got Huakaʻi, a heliotropium, and we have ahuava right here, as well as makaloa, as opposed to some of the other anchuline pools that have unfortunately been degraded by invasive species like batis or pickleweed and seashore paspalum and other non-native grasses. And so this is a better example of native vegetation on the outside of this anchuline pool. And unfortunately, there are still guppies on this side of the anchuline pool as well, but with time and patience and persistence and a lot of trapping and seining, we're hopeful that we can remove the guppies, and so the anchuline pool shrimp, our opai ula and metas, can thrive again here. Okay, I'm gonna try to sneak up onto this kolea. And so anchuline pools are really important habitat because they also provide food sources for a variety of migratory shorebirds and our native resident water birds, as well as a place to breed for the native pina'o dragonflies and damselflies. You see some dragonflies around here right now.
And the dragonflies actually can help us spot where the guppies are. I don't know if you can see the little rings in the water right now, but sometimes a dragonfly will fly over and it'll scare the guppies, and so we'll know where they're situated at that time, so we know where to put the traps based on where they are at that moment. So the dragonflies might not be native, but they're very helpful in the guppy removal process. So we are here at what we call the small pool at Mahaiula. So this pool has actually been guppy free since May 2018. It was full of guppies, just like the large pool. But we used a technique that was a bit experimental using CO2 or carbon dioxide. And what you do is you attach a cylinder of CO2 to diffusers and you put them in the pool. We would cover them with tarps to help trap the CO2 in the water, and you turn it on. And the ideal pH that they discovered in laboratory tests was you wanted to get to 5. So the average pH for this pool was about 6.7. So you turn it on, and what it does is it makes the guppies very slow and much easier to catch. The guppies are very fast. They're very difficult to catch with just a net. So what the CO2 would enable us to do is either it would drive them to the edges where we could just scoop them up from the edge of the pool, or we could get in the pool and scoop them up. There was a time where I was actually able to catch a guppy with just my hand. So now this pool is a great example of a healthy anchuline pool ecosystem. So you see all this green, that's the algae that the Opaiula eat. So basically a healthy anchuline pool ecosystem is you've got algae on the rocks. The opai eat the algae, the sun makes more algae, and the opai keep eating it. So when you introduce something like guppies or tilapia in a pool, it totally changes the whole balance of the ecosystem. The fish will eat the algae, they make the water quality really bad, and the opai are driven into the underground cracks. And so what's so great about removing all the guppies is now our opai can swim free in this pool. Now, you might be concerned about this, this green stuff that's floating on the top of the pool. It's not harmful to the Opaiula, and they actually, sometimes you can see they'll turn upside down and they'll eat it off the water surface. You can see that the water quality is still really clear, so this algae just sits right on top of it. So it's one of those things, it makes the pool look not very attractive, but it's not in any way harmful to the health of the anchuline pool ecosystem.
This is an underwater shot of that same pool, so you can see the Opaiula are recruiting back in and thriving.
Oh, and thanks again for joining us on this virtual tour of some of our coastal brackish ecosystems here on Hawaii Island. I hope that you've learned something new about aquatic invasive species and what we can each do to improve these habitats for our native flora and fauna, and how to prevent further spread of new invasive species to other ponds. So thank you so much for your time and attention, and I hope you share what you learned today, and also keep in touch. Reach out to your local aquatic biologist and see how you can get involved and learn more about these fragile habitats and how we can bring them back to health. Thanks so much.
All right, thanks Dena and Megan for that virtual Huakaʻi to the anchuline pools. So this is a side-by-side shot comparison of that pool that Dena was highlighting just earlier. So on the right side, you can see the pond before the guppies were removed, obviously. And then the restored pool on the left with Opaiula that naturally recruited back in. Another important thing to note here is the difference in the habitat conditions. So on the right, the invaded pool, you see, a bunch of sediment, decaying organic matter. Water clarity is not too good. So just the overall habitat conditions with invasive fish in there is worse. And then once they're removed, you look at this on the left side, you see better water clarity. Obviously, the endemic species are thriving, and we see a regrowth of beneficial microalgae on the rocks. So it's amazing to see just what removing one invasive species can do, and the hope that these habitats have, that they can be restored. So I'd like to end this segment of the presentation to highlight and acknowledge a very passionate and hardworking group of individuals who collectively call themselves Hui Loko. They're mainly based out of the Kona side with some representation from the Hilo side. But they're basically a network of fish pond, Hawaiian fish pond and anchuline pool caretakers and managers that come together and work together to restore and manage these rare and valuable habitats. And they're really doing that through perpetuating a tradition, a Hawaiian tradition called Malama Iko Wahi, which is to take care of your place. And that's a very key principle in this type of work. And it's because of these kinds of groups and these types of people and individuals that these anchoring pools have hope for restoration, even in the face of so many impacts, especially from invasive species. Okay, so shifting gears here, this will be part 2 of our presentation. So from here on, we'll be focusing on the tilapia expansion that we've been observing here in Hilo. Just a bit of background information on the site that we're talking about. It's called Waiakea Public Fishing Area, or PFA, and Wailoa River. It's located right here in Hilo Bay. It's about 17 hectares in aquatic habitat, mainly fed through groundwater with occasional surface runoff coming from Waiakea tributary and Waialama Canal. Surface salinity ranges from less than 1 parts per thousand to 10 parts per thousand, so nearly fresh water to brackish water. We have a daily tidal salt wedge, which is a wedge of salt water, like a high tide. Because the salt water is denser than fresh water, it creates this wedge that comes in within the system, and you have this stratification of different types of like salinity water. So you have fresher water on the top and saltier seawater on the bottom. Benthic or the bottom habitat is mainly composed of sediment, rocks, and some microalgae. And it's relatively shallow, less than 1 meter in depth. So basically what we have here is ideal habitat for some invasive species, one being tilapia. Now this place is historically a Royal Hawaiian fish pond, which belonged to King Kamehameha I. Currently, it's supporting the largest striped mullet recreational fishery in the state. And the fish that they're targeting is the ama, or the native striped mullet. And they use a very unique pole line method here in Hilo, where they actually use chain diatoms. So they collect and scrape this brown limu off the rocks, put it in a bucket, and they just swirl the hook in the bucket with the limu in it, and it attaches to the hook. And then they cast it out with a bobber and wait for the mullet to bite. So that's something very unique to Hilo, to use diatoms as bait for fish. Now, those of you that had the opportunity to listen to Kim's talk yesterday, she really highlighted the pervasiveness and the concern that we have with invasive fishes, especially in our estuaries. And this is just highlighting some of the common ones that we find in estuaries, Hawaiian estuaries. And those here circled in orange are those that are quite common in Waiakea Pond and Wailoa River. So we'll be focusing again on the tilapia expansion. So this is a video that was taken by our communications office last year. This is actually in the Waiakea tributary, which feeds directly into Waiakea Pond. So as you can see, is a large school of adult Nile tilapia that are swimming in there. We're not sure exactly when these fish made it into the system, but it's important to note that these fish have been in there and established for decades. But up until recently, they've been concentrated way up into the upper canal, the upper parts of the estuary. So you can see they really established themselves. They're reproducing, they're thriving, they're very healthy, big and fat. Here's another shot of them. You can see them on the bottom. So as I mentioned, they've been in here for a long time, but they've really been concentrated up in the canal and the upper parts of the estuary. Only until recently, we've been getting a lot of reports from mullet fishermen as well as park users that they've been noticing and catching tilapia, in the pond and in the lower parts of Wailoa River. And this here is actually a snapshot of a monthly survey that our estuary team does in Wailoa River, where we deploy an underwater video camera to record basically species composition. And we've been quite regularly getting footage of Nile tilapia in these surveys. As you can see here in the background on the left side is a large adult Nile tilapia. And this is in the lower part of Wailoa River, closer to the boat ramp and the boat harbor. And we've really never used to see this before. So this really verified, what the public was telling us, that, these fish are spreading further down, which raises a lot of concern. These are photos of just some of the tilapia that have been removed and caught by fishermen, and some of them have been, given to us by the fishermen because they don't want them. So it really shows, like the size and the abundance of these fish that are within the Waiakea Pond and Wailoa River. Now, in response to this, we put together a free fishing tournament last February to incentivize the take and fishing of these tilapia. But we opened it up, to any non-native fish, especially for the kids. And yeah, it was a week-long tournament. It was free, and yeah, it was a good event. So in total, we had 129 fishers that entered the tournament, 72 adults, 57 kids, so a wide range of ages and experience levels that entered the tournament. A total of 97 fish were caught and weighed, 60 of those being tilapia, and 37 were to'al, mainly caught by the kids. All of that totaled 108 pounds of fish, non-native fish that were removed from the system. The largest fish was a 5.7 pound Nile tilapia, which was the tournament winner, first place. And species recorded from this tournament included, of course, Nile tilapia. We also had some blue tilapia and Mozambique tilapia, and a bunch of to'al.
Nile tilapia.
We also had a bunch of displays and educational exhibits that were set up at the weigh-in event. We had a lot of prizes. Many of them were donated from local businesses. We also had a robotics team from Kalani High School design and fabricate the trophies for the winners, as you see there. So a lot of people helped and donated and provided, their assistance for this tournament. We also had a cooking demonstration put on by Hawaii Community College. Chef instructors took some of the tilapia and kanda from Wailoa River and actually demonstrated how to cook them up. And yeah, I can say they're pretty delicious. It was pretty unique, and a lot of people enjoyed the food that was provided. So just wanted to acknowledge all the people that came together to put this fishing tournament on, because it really it took a lot of hands, a lot of moving parts, a lot of minds to come together to put this together and make it a success. So just wanted to list all these, all of the organizations and groups and everyone that helped out, because it was really amazing to see so many people willing to help out and volunteer and put their time and effort into this. Now, some key takeaways from this event. First one, trophies plus prizes equals happy kids, definitely, and parents for that matter. But really the benefit from this is having the opportunity to provide outreach and have the kids and their families learn something about invasive species and realize the importance of estuaries for sport fish and the critical impact that invasive species can have, in these systems, but also to be able to identify what is invasive or what's a non-native species, what is. So it was really beneficial, and it was really exciting to see kids happy and excited to go out there again and fish for more of these fish. Are Nile tilapia easy to catch? That's a big negative. As we learned from this tournament, and we actually realized, we kind of knew that already, but just seeing the numbers, we had 129 participants with only, 60 tilapia that were caught. across all of those participants. And actually there's only a handful of people that actually caught tilapia. So it just really goes to show how smart these fish are. You know, they're very wary. As Kim highlighted yesterday, that these fish in their natural range have adapted and are hyper aware of threats that come from above, because they, you know, in their natural range, they're exposed to or preyed upon by a lot of birds. So they naturally look above water to see and look out for threats. So that puts fishermen at a disadvantage, because once they see them, they're gone. So you need to be very stealthy. It takes a lot of skill, expertise, and patience to catch these fish. And that also poses a challenge for us, because if we're trying to encourage people to go out there and catch these fish, I mean, how can we do that if these fish are so difficult to catch? So that's something to think about. Are invasive fish good to eat? You bet. You know, as the Hawaii Community College Culinary Arts Program chefs, you know, demonstrated, yes, you know, these fish are good. The tilapia are widely cultured for food. So we really want to encourage those that go out and can catch these fish to keep them and eat them, because we really want to remove that reputation that tilapia seem to have here, especially here in Hawaii, that they're not a good fish, or they're rubbish fish. That's hardly the case, especially for these particular species. They're big, and then they actually do taste quite good. So we want to encourage people to go out there and eat and catch the fish. Some ongoing tasks. So we want to continue coordinating and strategizing more netting efforts. We had one netting effort last year, and as we learned, again, these fish are very smart. They avoid nets and they stop short of the gill nets. And they find any way to avoid capture. So we really need to rethink and strategize our efforts. And so our removal efforts when we go out there is more effective. We need to continue our estuary monitoring, our sampling programs, to really keep a good handle on the species composition of fish in the estuary, both native and non-native species, and the distributions, whether those are changing or not throughout these habitats. If we are to effectively manage, these problems and manage these habitats, to improve fisheries and ecosystem function. We need to continue education and outreach, like this opportunity right here, just to continue spreading awareness and making it known that, invasive fish are very prevalent in our estuaries. As again, going back to Kinstock, there's roughly half of the species that we collect in our sampling is considered non-native. So we want to continue education and outreach and ask the public to remain vigilant when they're fishing or going out there, to keep an eye out for these species. There's also been a lot of talk and a lot of requests about, hey, when we're going to have a second fishing tournament. As you can see, it took a lot of hands and minds to come together to put the fishing tournament together. So we want to start planning now and potentially hold one for next year. Yeah, stay tuned for that, and we'll see if we can hold another one, and maybe we might expand it and change some things that we learned from the first tournament. Now, it's next to impossible that we're going to be able to effectively remove invasive fishes from all of these habitats, whether they're anchoring pools or the estuary. So we really need, but we can continue to remove them and, do our best job to keep them in controllable levels, but also to look at different approaches. And one is to really aim at restoring and improving the native habitat, so the native species have a fighting chance. So it really is a multi-pronged approach, to invasive species mitigation. And it's really coming down to, maintaining and improving the resilience of these habitats, because there's a lot of things that are out of our control that, no matter what we do, there are going to be impacts. So if we can do things that can improve the resilience of these habitats, maybe these native fish, even in the face of And in the presence of native or invasive species, you know, they can have a chance to survive and thrive. So with that, I just want to say mahalo to everyone, and also our collaborators and everyone that helped put this together, and all the work that's been done.